Blessed love and peace in Rastafari. Just for your information, I'm being stopped whilst I'm working, so this is expensive at this point. It's already the off day. I'm working, and now I'm being stopped whilst I'm working. So, um, a number of things. All right, four things actually. No notes. One is about getting over. Another one is about superiority. First one is about native. And the fourth one is about women. Native, getting over, superiority, and women. Those are the four joints. First one, native. Recognizing and observing some of the recent activities of kinfolk in my tribe, the tribe of my ancestors, specifically, particularly Muskogee, Seminole. We observe, I mean, just through the years, through the generations, the very strong attachment to two imperialist things, and this is not hate, but this is like just a statement of fact. One is the United States being involved in the military, and additionally, the other one is Christianity. Not hating on that. We study and practice the Gospels too, as part of the world tradition. That being said, it's very necessary and very appropriate for kinfolk to recognize, for native kinfolk to recognize that when native kinfolk do this, particularly not just getting involved with the U.S. military, but like continuing with the color guard and the honor guard, not hating on this, but just recognizing this, what's actually being done. Because it's a shutting off of the mindset. It's part of the conditioning. It's part of the oppression. It's part of the downpression, and additionally, so we know it's beyond people's volition, as it beyond people's own doing, and that's not to say that people are just like peons or whatever else, but I mean, people are doing the best they can with the conditions, so we're not hating on that. It's very necessary to recognize what happens when kinfolk do this. There's benefits that are provided. There's attachment to the government. There's attachment to the benefits of with the government in terms of riches, and additionally standing back up and competing with other native factions. The whole situation with Pine Ridge, and additionally back in the day, Leonard Peltier, and further, peace and blessings be with him. So that's a long-standing situation between native kinfolk. That's actually what allows the imperialism into native land in a temporal sense, is the divisiveness amongst native kinfolk, and trying to get advantages, whether it's guns or otherwise, against each other. And in doing that, getting attached to the technology, and then opening the door for the settlers, the imperialists, to set up shop and wreck shop. So that's from the beginning, even before Columbus, to this day. So when native kinfolk, is just part of the history. That being said, not hating on it either. I mean, we have our own different thing. We're not part of that, but at the same time, we're not hating on that. We're communicating what happens when this is done. So people get advantages with this. People get benefits, military benefits. People get education. People get status. People get favored backing in terms of involvement in native governments. So there's all these very, very significant benefits that kinfolk get. Even just standing status, when just the whole military thing in the native community. And we know there's the heritage and the tradition and the culture of honoring military service and the warrior and bravery, and additionally we know that's a strong part of native culture. But at the same time, when that's done in the context of the U.S. military, at that point what native kinfolk are doing is attaching to imperialism. And it's not just a matter of what happens on this land. When native kinfolk go into other lands and kill people and rape and pillage other people in other lands, that opens the door for the world to come back here. Plain and simple. That's how the game works. You already know this. But a lot of cats get enveloped in the ignorance, just not turning a blind eye to that. And doubling down on native isn't it. Even doubling up on native language ain't it either. Inamaka speaks beyond this. and justice and truth and consequences speak beyond that too. We encourage, obviously, the whole thing we talk about is language, and that includes native language, and we know how treasured and precious and necessary native language is. But there's no shield. There's no shield for the world returning and manifesting balance, not necessarily in a positive way. And when native kinfolk double down and with the honor guard, the color guard, and tout about military service and military involvement in the U.S., going overseas, you're talking about killing other people. You're giving the world further legitimate beef to come back at native kinfolk, not just at the United States, at native kinfolk, to take land, come back at it, and not necessarily conquest in the same sense of imperialism, but invite somebody else to do so, or other types of adverse circumstances. So it's just a matter of recognizing that. And this is not a threat. This is not a wish. We're communicating the consequences. We're communicating the mathematics that are involved in relinquishing the medicine. And that's what's being done when kinfolk attach to the military. Particularly, now Christianity is another thing, because Christianity is imperialism. It's the Roman religiosity. Jesus shares truth. Jesus shares light. Jesus is truth, and Jesus is light, and teaches that everyone else is too children of God. And so we recognize the spiritual awakening that native kinfolk experience in being shared the Gospels. And we respect that, we support that. When kinfolk attach to the Christianity religiosity, that's another thing, because that's imperialism, as you already know. Perhaps less so obvious on this side, because the northern methodologies of imperialism are a little bit further pimpy and like subtle compared to the conquistadors initially, presumably, where it's a priest on one hand and it's the sword on the other hand. But we already know that in native experience about the complicity amidst the missionary Protestant and the cavalry, the extension of the Crusades and otherwise. So when native kinfolk are so emphatic about Christianity in that false way of passive aggressive animosity towards others, that's not Jesus. That's religiosity. That's the fallacies of the apostles and the ones who are continuing to strive and at the same time become unduly authoritarian. So when native kinfolk get on that, further susceptibility beyond the government side, but further into the spiritual side. So not hating on that, but just to be mindful when that is imposed as a pretense for participating in native culture, whether it's language classes or otherwise, there are consequences. Again, we're not threatening, we're articulating. So that's the first thing. It's challenging, it's frustrating, because we continue to see the divisiveness, and when we simply just, in this respect, we're just endeavoring to be native, and like we can talk about Jesus. We do talk about Jesus. We study Jesus. We study the Gospels thoroughly. We live it, and that's the challenge. Because most Christianity ain't living it, but are preaching it. So that's a whole other topic. But when native kinfolk do that, we're speaking to them, and just recognizing that the door is like being further opened to the get back. And the get back manifests in many different ways. So, ain't nobody else to blame but ourselves. Actually, whilst I'm at it, one thing we invite native kinfolk to do, Rastafari does not proselytize. Not trying to make anybody else Rastafari. However, that being said, we can share information. And speaking from an experience of practice of the Gospels, and additionally sharing truth, Jesus talking about um, not necessarily having a gripe with each other, whatever, but just being honest with each other and ministering to each other in this respect. So in that, in the guidance, and in this spirit, the consideration for kinfolk, native kinfolk particularly, um, in being true to Jesus and being true to the Gospels and to the teaching of Jesus and to the Word, it's this, to recognize that there is a practice of Christianity, there is a practice of the Gospels that exists today that is considerably independent and autonomous from the Roman Catholic Church. Protestantism is very much attached to the Roman Catholic Church. Even though there's tenacious wars against each other, it's still a lineage from the Roman Catholic Church. The two predominant branches that I'm talking about is the Coptic Church that goes through Africa, Egypt, Ethiopia, and otherwise, and then the Orthodox Church, which is Russia, Greek, thereabouts. Particular point here is recognizing the autonomy, the comparative autonomy, generally speaking, from Rome. And in that autonomy, having some perspective in seeing how much Roman Catholicism as well as Protestantism is very much simply a continuation and evolution of the Roman methodology of governance through the guise and through the fusion of the spiritual message that Jesus shares. And it's important to recognize, because that message becomes co-opted and subdued as a simple pretense for conquest. And so instead of just exclusively relying upon sword and military might, it becomes a matter of rhetoric, particularly when contending with the northern elements initially in Europe from the Mediterranean, recognizing that might alone ain't doing it. And so there has to be another way of penetrating into the formidable wheels that are turning, that are keeping the Roman Empire at bay. And so there's the spirituality that gets into the core of being, and then within the infiltration, annihilation, subordination, isolation, automations. So that's the Roman methodology. And that's not hate towards Roman Catholicism. There's a lot of beautiful things. Saint Benedict, Saint Francis of Assisi, even Saint Ignatius, and otherwise. There's so many things. It's not a categorical lambasting or categorical condemnation. It's a matter of understanding the nature of things. And today, rather than just accepting everything as rote and given or whatever else, to be honest about this, and so that we at this moment minimize those historic transgressions and ignorances, and focus increasingly on the truth as much as we can. But I mean, it's just plain as day that the vast amount of Christianity is not practicing. It's not even, doesn't look anything remotely close to the life that Jesus lives, as it's described basically and simply within the Gospels. Nowhere close, and much further resembling Caesar and the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So that's just facts. And so when kinfolk get on the high horse about religiosity, whether it's native or otherwise, that there's falsity with that, and there's challenges, there's consequences to that. When native kinfolk do it, it's further troubling, because this is like indigeneity is, I won't say the last stronghold or whatever, but that's where the reflection occurs. That's where the return occurs. And so it's a critical point in civilizational experience. And it's a continual wrestling. Yet we just articulate this accordingly so kinfolk can be knowledgeable. And right in the middle of the heartland, Oklahoma, Lakota land, and further, I think there's less of that religiosity in Dakotas, but still, that's not, there's not a shield. So anyways, that's one of the things about that. That's what I have to say about that. Second thing we said, not superiority, getting over. All right. So this is confession. This is confession time. It's bearing witness, and it's sharing some healing solution. So getting over what I'm talking about. Back in the 80s, back in the day, So we had cassette tapes. That was the main thing having growing up. But the people who had money and everything, CDs. That's when CDs just started coming out, like 85 thereabouts. So that's 30. Well, 40 years ago. Wait, no, am I serious? Yeah. Wow, 40 years ago. All right. So point is, back in those days, no internet. Just this is for the youth to imagine like what life is like with this situation. For us, like growing up, like we had to imagine like what life was like just watching black and white TV. Like that was the previous generation. That just seemed old, but we could still imagine it. We could still see it. It's difficult to discern how much youth, children, can actually perceive our actuality of life growing up without internet, without phones or whatever. So point being, music was very different. We had cassette tapes, and we could actually record our own cassette tapes. We could make voice recordings depending upon the device we have. But we could also record music, and it was illegal, but basically bootlegging. But I mean, everybody did it. Um, so um, then we had the radio. The radio is the main thing. The radio let us know who the artists are, what's the latest, and everything else like that. That was the main thing that people listened to. That was the main thing that was available. Cassette tape was like next level type stuff, particularly like people talking today about whether to let their children have iPhones or whatever, or mobile phones. Back in the day, the question was like whether a child can have their own radio, or if they have their own radio, whether they can have their own tape. Oh, the hawk just flexed and just flew up on the tree here. All quiet. Let's see how long it takes for the Blue Jays to come through and say, "Not here, buddy." Ooh, dee. Oh, look, it sounds like the hawk done got somebody slipping. Ooh, that's kind of graphic. I could hear it. It was a sparrow. It still is. And the thing about it is, hawks start eating even when the sparrow is still living. Hawks don't even care. They're like, because they don't know how long they got. They ain't got time to worry about whether this dude is dead or not. I'm eating. Nasty. I could hear like the hawk just swooped in kind of quietly. It was kind of visible because it came all across the courtyard and then flew onto the branch here. Oftentimes the hawks do that to like position for anything, but they got at somebody because I could hear the sparrow kind of chirping. And sparrows do not back that up. Sparrows don't come through when somebody gets caught. It's like sparrows got to bounce. That's how sparrows roll. If it's blue jays, that's a different situation. But I could hear the sparrow like chirping and chirping and chirping, and then the chirping stopped. But I've been in a situation before where like the hawks don't wait for the sparrow to die. They just start diving in, plucking away through the feathers. I've had it snow in the middle of summer with the feathers of a sparrow. Anyways, it's the nastiness of the forest. Predatory. The story of predatory. Anyway, all right. So we're going on the second joint was about all getting over. So back in the day, cassettes. People would make cassette tapes. We can record it. We can record other music. It wasn't illegal to do so, but people did it. People found ways of getting past the protections or whatever else, putting a tape over the top of the cassette or whatever. That's old school. So, point is, so already there's contention about what the legalities are, particularly about music, and then what the common practice is, and how people rationalize that, of like, because the logic of it is like not to bootleg because that's considered stealing, and this is actually the musician. Like, why would you steal from somebody whose music you want to listen to? That seems like, I think, but the actuality is that the musicians don't make much of that money anyways. Musicians make money from performances, tickets, The money from the record sales basically goes to the distribution mechanisms, the label companies, the distribution companies, and otherwise. So most people aren't there that aware of that, but still, it's just like I want to listen to music, and it's like this innate, like it's a very a primordial cultural thing of like this is the music I'm listening to, this is the music of my peoples and my culture. I have a right, and this get reverts into this individualism. I have the right to do this, and even beyond the whole notion of individualism, it's a legitimate thing for people to have their culture, um, which is what I'm getting to. Because what the actual like severity of the situation is actually revealed in that um, void. But that's a little bit further on into this joint. So, anyways, people basically rationalize, yo, I ain't hurting nobody. Um, they got their money, they celebrity, they did. I can see the video, they living it up. So I ain't hurting them too tough, and I'm supporting them by having their music and bumping their music. So, anyways, that's the rationalization. That's one level of getting over, quote unquote. It's just like bootleg. My dad did it, and one of the things is this: like, my dad got the LPs. He's a blessed memory. He's a very strong jazz enthusiast, and so at one point in his life, he had a lot of LPs, a lot of albums of jazz musicians, and he had it in the basement at one time in the previous house. It got flooded. All the albums got ruined, and so it's that prospect of like building up one's music library, and it ain't cheap. And so instead of doing that, and again, the technology changes. So then at some point, nobody uses albums any further, particularly at this day at least. Maybe there's a return to that in some ways. But so then people use 8-track tapes, or then people use cassette tapes, or then people they use CDs, or then people use MP3s. So then people got to repurchase everything else again. So that's getting over on people because I already paid for this album 50 years ago when it first came out. Why I pay for it 5 times over? Now people just do services. I don't even know what people do too tough actually. Playlists. Now the hog done bounced. Quick like. So presumably there's a carcass of a sparrow right nearby. Consider what happens to that. Maybe that's where the crows come in. But the Blue Jays don't mess. I didn't hear the Blue Jays ring the bell, ring the alarm too tough. I actually see some sparrows in the branches. Anyway, just getting over in both directions about music and culture. However, my point for this one I'm about to share is that what I personally do, and like what a lot of people do, but that don't make it right. What I do eventually, which has further significant implications and eventualities. Well, actually, before I say what I do, just say what the circumstances are again. In those days, again, less aware of what the circumstances are today, but in those days, like a youth standing at school, and additionally, is significantly influenced by what they know about culture. If they have the music, if they can listen to it, if they can share it with people, if they put people onto music, like that person gets credit for doing that. Oh, they know what's going on. They got the music. Like, well, listen to what they listen to. So there's a vested interest. It's a significant thing in terms of knowing the music and otherwise. If somebody has a huge collection, yo, they got the music. Oh no, they got everything. That's like standing. So for kinfolk who don't have that much money, don't have that big allowance or whatever else like that, it's like you got to be very judicious about purchases or any type of acquisitions. Even just buying, paying for buying blank tapes, that's expensive, right? That's a cost. So have to be selective about that, and then which albums to or which records or tapes to dub. So, but the point here is that culture is significant, and the music is significant, and it provides status, it provides standing, it strengthens relationship within a community, within circles, within social circles. So there's a very strong motivation for youth to have music, and particularly the current music that is out, and to have what everybody else has, to be able to socialize in the way other people socialize, to be able to know the lyrics, know the songs, know the references, know the jokes, like everybody else does, as part of the culture. And without that, people are excluded. They don't know what we're talking about. Oh, you ain't got the album. You don't know what we're talking about. That's serious things as a youngster, building relationships, and additionally, again, culture shapes politics, who we socialize with, what we talk about, what we plan in life. That is significantly influenced. People being inspired by a particular album, road trip experiences, otherwise. So culture is significant, and an inextricable relationship between peoples and culture, and music included within that culture. So that's some of the significance, the tremendous sacred significance within culture and music, and the need that people have for that, and how and why people go to different lengths and measures to satisfy that need, to meet that need. Or the light done got bright all of a sudden. uh Not complaining. um so I'm one of the ones that didn't have a lot of that available. We've focused our investments otherwise. Um, so when I did have opportunities like getting blank tapes and dubbing, yeah, that's what I would do. Now that might be considered getting over. It was technically illegal, a violation of copyright and otherwise. Um, but again, it's common practice. So not a big deal necessarily one way or the other. And if we talk about stealing intellectual property itself and otherwise, even in a spiritual, like Torah or Quran based um, um, logic, or teaching and guidance and law, um, that would be interesting to discern what the rulings are about those types of phenomena. Anyways, this is not the point. We're getting further into this about the notion of getting over. So that would be the thing whilst I was younger. Now, when I got a little bit older, late teens, about the university age, still not a lot of money. And but now like the stakes is higher. Now I'm at university, and like now it's like further pressures. Just again to keep up with the Joneses. Not even just to keep up with the Joneses, but like just to have some cultural familiarity and otherwise. Like to have some music as a library to listen to. The radio is still the main thing, but it don't have everything. And at some point, like the the repertoire gets off of what just played on the radio. We gotta listen to old school stuff that's not played on the radio too tough. We gotta listen to underground stuff, and other things that's going on in life that's teaching us what's happening and guiding us in the actuality. So all that being said, there was a thing back in that day, where like I want to say it was like Columbia Music or something like that, but it was like some of the big music company, one of the big music company, and actually there were a few like BMG, I think was another one. Oh, look at all these plugs they're giving, and then they're like, I ain't getting no money for that. So there's the payback. I don't even know if the companies are exist at this point. Anyways, a few of the record companies um, somehow had the availability of all these different records, all these different CDs, all these different genres of music, country, pop, hip hop, whatever else. And so there was these things called magazines back in those days, and these music companies would have, it got rather like expansive at some point, but they would have like these insert advertisements that was like a pull out kind of thing, meaning that like there would be like a hard cardboard or something like that paper, different from what the magazine usually is, and it would have like an entire category of all these albums, of all this music, hundreds of selections that people could choose from, like going to a record store, even further than going to a record store, hundreds and hundreds of selections, and sometimes it would be a multi-page advertisement, like you have thousands of offerings of music, And it got so much to the point of like being very specific of depending on what magazine it was. It could be just a specific genre of country music if it's a country magazine, or it could be hip hop music if it's hip hop magazine. It got to that point of popularity of like just a very prominent way of people purchasing music. So what would happen is, and it was the advertisement is, get all these, get 11 CDs for one penny. What? Then the fine print is agreement of a membership for 3 years and purchasing a CD each month for the next 3 years. Contract in order to get that initial offer of 11 CDs. And it was CDs. Like that's the shishi bourgeoisie. Not even cassette tapes, it's the CDs. So not only does one increase their library, but advanced technology now. You can be with the high rollers. 11 CDs, you get a kickstart on your library repertoire. At 16, 17 years old, you can be in the game. 11 CDs, not enough, 20 CDs for $1. So all those different types of offers. But again, the fine line. So put your name on it, so an address. So now there's that legality, and then signing the contract at the bottom of the mail-in brochure or whatever. It's tick off which CDs you want. Give your address. Put in that dollar. Put in that 1 penny. The symbolic buy-in kind of gesture. But the main thing was signing on the dotted line, because what that does for the higher ups is just they don't care about the money. They want people to sign their basically it's their soul, because if they pay for it, fine, beautiful. They pay, and the regular price for the rest of the CDs is like what one would pay at the record store. So they're getting over on that in terms of like they give 20 CDs away for free. That's fine because it costs them hardly anything to produce it after it's already being produced. But then if somebody does honor their contract for the next 3 years, that means they get 36 purchases of CDs at regular retail price. That's a nice bargain. So that's that. And it's particularly youth that's doing this. If the youth don't pay, guess what? That's the youth's soul. A smidgen, because now the youth have reneged, have betrayed the contract, have gone back on their word, and that provides further cosmic legitimacy in the companies. So again, it's part of the pimp game of reeling people in ways that people don't recognize or people don't readily understand or don't readily remember. So anyways, I got caught up in that, as many kinfolk do, because we just see, we're getting over, they can't make us pay, we don't care about our credit. And that was the thing too. But once they have the name, the address, when it happens, then so and so hasn't paid us. This is going to go into the credit agencies or whatever else. And now that person has a mark on their credit. So that's how I begin my situation with that, and my credit ratings and everything else. I would send it in, get the list of things, and when it arrived, you think Amazon was something? When that stack of CDs arrived in the mail at a dorm room or whatever, it's on. It's on. So I'm getting over them. It's right here. They can't do nothing. I got it now. What they gonna do? Let's roll. So that's what it was. Did that on a few occasions. Now after some point, like it gets blocked. Like people get on lists or whatever. People can only do it for so much. People can fake their names. If it becomes too severe, like cats can just look at the address and be like, this is a suspect address or whatever else. So eventually, like there's a line that's drawn and be like, nah, you got over too much. We got enough of yo, so that's enough for you. And then when again there's the consequence. One of the immediate temporal consequences is credit rating. Now here get to the point. And actually I have to be mindful because the storage on this joint has dropped. We're at 6. So I was getting over on myself, thinking I was getting over on the company by getting the CDs, getting that immediate payout. But I was getting over on myself because I was going back on my word. I was engaging in contracts that I wasn't honoring and fulfilling. as a 17-year-old, as an 18-year-old. People can talk about legal age or whatever else, but there is a certain amount of legitimacy in terms of the scrutiny about adults contracting with youth. But at the same time, young men particularly, we got to own up for what we're doing, and recognize that. So, and again, just part of the purpose of this is to quell, to like calm our ambitions and our greed, and just our opportunism of thinking, oh, yo, we got the hookup, we got this. There's always a price of it. Ain't no such thing as a free lunch. My dad always tells us this, a blessed memory. So, again, when doing this, we rationalize this because we want to be fair. We know injustice. We experience injustice by the simple fact of being deprived of the culture to have to go to, or to perceive ourselves as having to go to a company for us to receive our culture, music and otherwise. We already either explicitly or intrinsically know what injustice is, and thus we have an interest of being just. And so in doing this, we rationalize this as a way of like evening things, balancing whatever else. And there's a certain legitimate reason within that logic, but there's a lot of deceitfulness and greed and twistedness within that logic too. There's a further point here. What is beneficial to recognize is that it's not a solution, because it simply continues the reliance and the dependency upon the companies, the distribution companies, the record companies and labels, and additionally to experience the culture. It continues reinforcing the paradigm and the methodology where musicians who share the culture, who've learned about history and the previous musicians and genres of music, continue to rely upon the standard methodologies of recording and distribution to continue that music, instead of directly sharing the music with people, without the record companies, without the distribution companies, directly, acoustic, drop the mic, where the musicians have direct relationships with communities, show the instrumentation, play the instruments, teach the children and the youth the drum, the guitar, the piano, the horns, and further. Don't have to worry about the record companies. Don't have to worry about the distribution companies. We make our own music. We make our own music instruments. That's what sovereignty is. So it takes a mindset. When we think we're getting over, again, we're just entangling ourselves within the affliction, the oppression. And it's particularly when we think we're getting over, particularly when we're satisfying ourselves against the rules of convention or whatever else, thinking, oh, this is justice, this is our reparations. It's just further entanglements within the game. Which actually also, I'm going to say this here, because I'm uncertain how much I'm going to have available to like say this specifically, but somewhat of a side note. Native getting over supremacy in women. Okay, so we got. Are we completed with getting over? So the bottom line in this joint is just culture and music. There's a primordial need, and I'm going strong on this word legitimacy today. However, rather than just that translating into a right to have access to conventional methods, even when it's downloading, bootlegging from YouTube or otherwise, that ain't even it. And that's actually further entanglement within the dissonance. What it is learning our instruments, learning how to make our instruments, learning how to play our instruments, sharing our instruments and music with each other directly, without technology, without the internet, without the reliance upon the middle people and the middle people policies, and not getting mad at the middle people and the middle people policies either, because it's comparatively inconsequential to our sharing ourselves, our ancestors, our language, our ways. All right. So that's that. Now again, the side note here. I was watching another video and I stopped watching it because when I heard this, I was just like, nah. So it's mixed sister. She's a beautiful sister, intelligent, tends to be rather candid. It's interesting to try to find like her posts or whatever, because in coming up with the results, and the first time I see her, it was just on somebody else's joint where she's speaking, and it was like a short recording or whatever. Then when like following up, searching her name, presuming like she has her own platform or whatever, she does. It seems, however, it's less like conspicuous than one would think based upon how much she's featured in other people's stuff. But anyways, and to be honest, her name escapes me though, but she's Blasian out of the UK. I think Milan or something like that. But anyways, I don't want to be too presumptuous or erroneous or otherwise, because this is what I have to say is somewhat critical. So first, I share the positive. So she shares some interesting insight, some valuable insight, candid talk. That's very valuable in some of the things that she says on other people's platform. Then, when going to her platform and downloading one of her conversations, she's interviewing a brethren who's presumably an accountant. We're talking about different things about money, and I could see already. I saw some other videos where she's talking about money, and a lot of the mindset that she's working from is just kind of like a hustle kind of mindset. So I'm not hating on that, but again, that we recognize that for ourselves and in this life, solution is beyond the hustle game, because that's still just all the imperialism and all the trope about justice and inequality and everything else is still just one of those tropes within the imperialist corporation. So we see the limit, or the I don't want to say the limited, but the context that she's working in. So that kind of quells or like slows up some of the enthusiasm, whatever. But still, download one of the conversations she's talking about with the brethren with his shades on, talking about him being an accountant, talking about the issue of reparations. And this is where like there was the trouble, and then we had to just like stop. We just had to like turn it off. And it got to this point where she was talking about, she made it, and it was how the whole thing was framed, which reveals further intentionality. And we're gonna be mindful of this storage thing situation. So she's talking with the brethren, and they got on to the topic of reparations. Now, again, just as like a disclaimer, where we stand on the reparations situation. Obviously, there's a strong reason for that, but we recognize that's not the answer. One, regardless of how much money is issued, it's not going to be enough, because it's not going to be justice. Just to think, you don't get justice from money. That's not what does it. I learned that a long time ago in law school and further. It just ain't gonna happen. So there ain't no justice on this earth. So that's anyway. Now that being said, it's not going to be enough in that respect to like make up for whatever happened beforehand. And then once people do pay that, they say, no, you can't talk about it any further because we've already paid for it now. So shut up, get on with life. That's one thing, and that's one of the susceptibilities and negatives in that scenario, because there's legitimacy. Like, yeah, no, shut the fuck up. Don't talk about that no more. Don't talk about the middle passage. Don't talk about this, that, and the other. No. We don't care about lingering effects. No, we did reparations. So remember this. No, shut the fuck up. That's the susceptibility. So then ain't no money gonna cover that. So that's one thing. The other thing also is that kinfolk do not have the discipline to utilize the money in an effective way. It's like the lottery ticket. It could be 5 million. I think that's the figure they're talking about. It could be 5 million pounds sterling, and kinfolk are gonna blow it quick. They don't have the discipline, and then the world's like, look at you. You have 5 million, and what'd you do? You can't say nothing now. That's demise at that point. That's demise. Ain't got no kind of materiality, ain't got no type of political leverage, psychic leverage, or otherwise. That's demise. That's worse than the worst. And that's the actuality. That's what you just can expect. Recognize just how people deal with money. Money itself has its own mindset and isn't. So that's the thing. It's like if you don't like the game, get out the game. Don't try to get further chips in the game. Get out the game. That's plain and simple. If anything, it's not a matter of money. And the brethren at the actually was very prudent in saying like it's first of all, the cost of the affliction is infinite. Like there's no calculating that because you look at the benefits. If you're just going to try to rationalize this and try to look at it in actual conventional terms and reduce it to a number, is him coming from the accounting thing, and I'm coming from basically an economic type of background. Again, like you look at the positives, the benefit, the tangible benefits that are gleaned from the enslavement. First of all, it's also not recognizing that slavery exists all around the world, even to this day, and it's the African slave trade is not a unique phenomenon, and so to like expect reparations in the sense of this is against world customs and this is a violation against world culture. No, slavery been around for a long time, and it's not about you're drinking the Kool-Aid of political correctness, of presuming that the world actually gives a fuck. It does not. That's the gaslighting. So this feigned kind of sense of morality and virtue of like this is a violation against norms. What norms are you talking about? No, it's not. This is life. The thing about it is you get back. you get up and get back. That's what it is. Not stand there and expect somebody to say, "Oh, my bad. I shouldn't have done that. You're right. This is the age of enlightenment." No, you're drinking the Kool-Aid and it's laced. So to expect that to happen, it's like that's not how it works. It's a matter of you yourself sobering up and be like, you know what? Nah, wait, hold up. Take that whip back. Stop, first of all. And yo, I'm bouncing. And no, you're not going to come back at me either because I've learned the game. And I got you. That's how it works. Not reparations. Not, oh, massa, you being bad. You owe me. That's not how it works. That's just evidence of how much the chains are in the brain. That's not how the game works. So that whole trope is delusional. It's a matter of cultivating discipline and standing up. And it ain't got to be Nat Turner per se, or Denmark Vesey per se, or Toussaint Louverture per se. But it does involve that type of like, nah. The brethren from Brazil and the Guarani land. I continue to work on remembering that. Anyway, from Congo. It's that, yo, you can keep your money. I don't want your money. I don't even want your life. I want my life. I want to be free. Anyways, and that's up to me. So you can keep your reparations. If anything, it's a land. And even at that point, it's not a matter of like Ulysses Grant establishing Liberia. This is a matter of like, yo, world, identify a location where you're not gonna just fuck up shit, and do that quick, and that's where we'll live. Is that type of joint for kinfolk who are on that lifestyle, or on that mind tip, on that mind frame. Now, a lot of kinfolk are not on that mind frame. A lot of kinfolk are still on that get over mind frame, and instead of actually wanting to be liberated, just want to continue in being imperialist and just have a higher status. Because in that same conversation, she's talking about the finer things of life, the difference between having a 15-pound steak and a 100-pound steak. That's the mentality. You're talking about reparations. What you need reparations for if you're on this tip of living the finer life. Bullshit. That's contradictory. Either you're living the finer life and valuing yourself accordingly and devaluing other people accordingly, based upon affording £100 steak, 100 sterling steak. That type of kinfolk don't need reparations. For what? You eating £100 steaks? What you talking about reparations? 5 million? Who you gonna take that from? The logic, the presumption, the presumptuousness. And then, like, okay, yeah, 5 million pounds. So you're gonna have, how many is that? What is that? 500,000 pound, 500,000 steaks. 500,000. No, isn't it? No, that's not 50,000. 50,000 100-pound steaks. Is that what that is? 50,000. Is that a lifetime? A lifetime worth of 100-pound steaks. What happens when the steaks double up on their price? Ooh-dee. You don't control that. See what it is? See how limited the money is? Land. Established land. Now you have security, comparatively speaking. You have residence. You have school. You have economy. You have community. Land. That's a situation. And there's no money on that. Land does not cause money. Money is an imagination. So it's a matter of treaties and brokering those arrangements of saying we have our collective of people. This is our constituency. So-and-so thousand, so-and-so a million. We organized. We're identifying this land right here. Now you got to have reasons for that. Is this our ancestral land? Is this the land where we reside right now? Is this the land that's being underutilized? Is this the land that has been polluted? And we have a plan for healing? One premise. It's not just a matter of we deserve this land. A lot of people can say that. Premises for like being on land. Who is here now? Who is here first? Who is providing the greater care for the land? Who is providing the greater productivity with the land? There are a couple of other protocols, but those are some of the main ones. So it's a matter of having a peoples organized, not just some conjecture and some people who have some knowledge about things. Because again, you want to be on the world stage, and that's what's necessary for this type of policy. Otherwise, be very careful, because if it is granted, it's not coming from an organized constituency of people of African ancestry. It's coming from the manipulations and calculations of the imperialism saying, oh, we figured out how this is going to be beneficial for us. Be very careful about that. Because like I said, the further effects is what I described, demise. So, demise indeed. So, basics, people, discipline, law within oneself, autonomy from how things are done around that community. The Nation of Islam is a further example of that. But even then, the Nation of Islam is still very much connected. We can talk about other fronts in terms of black militancy within the United States. But again, we have yet to see a collective of kinfolk being proficiently, prudently autonomous from the U.S. system. So kinfolk are repatriating. That's another further solution. That's genuine and authentic and enduring. But that has its own things, because even the governments of Africa, as I just mentioned in a previous joint recently, are very much influenced by U.S. policy and lobbying and otherwise. So, yeah, we're chopping into this. We're an hour into this, and like I said, I'm being stopped whilst I'm working. So, and also storage. Is that the priority now? Is that what's governing the expediency? We're at Cinco right now. All right. So that was a side note. So, no, that wasn't even the challenge. I'm getting off on that. So here we go. This is why we had to turn it off, because then she's talking about she made a very valid point, a very astute point. It spoke very articulately, very very strongly, like she knows what she's talking about, and very definitively. And she was describing like the Holocaust and the Jewish community, and she said that one of the reasons why that is very effective, aside from like Jews being organized increasingly. Like even before the affliction, is that it was done right when after it happened, and that there was an organized front of establishing the reparations. There was a specific amount articulated. There was a specific rationale, and additionally, and the methodology of getting it done. And so she addresses that. She articulates that in a very skillful way, in a very again, legitimate way of giving an example of one scenario of when reparations are established. And again, that's in a civilizational thing. It's like we got at, and now we get back and do it organized. And it's not expecting Deutschland, Germany, to like find the error of its ways and be like self volunteering. It was a matter of negotiating, leveraging, coalition building, and additionally, it'd be like, no, this got to happen type of situation. So that's what she was articulating in an appropriate way. Now, where we had to turn it off, when she started tripping and like lost all types of credibility with this joint. And she says it very casually in a similar manner of just being forthright and like she didn't harp on it too specifically or otherwise. But what she said is she talked about and she said something like in Africa or in the United States in America, like people got reparations too, which is why it's not talked about that much in America today. Like, whoa. Not only is that like nearly completely false, but that seems just so intentionally false as to say, like, uh, black people in the United States have already gotten reparations and thus don't talk about it too tough today. What? And at that point, then we get into the whole mixed black thing because she's Blasian, so she's mixed, but she's also African, but she's UK. But that type of statement just lends itself to that kind of flame of just saying, "Oh, look at mixed people doing this and that." And the thing is, like, she's speaking very intelligently on 1 second about Holocaust and reparations, and then she says that, which is all types of falsity. Now, whether she's just misinformed, whether she's just ignorant or whatever, it's difficult to discern. And to her, I mean, just to be mindful and not be too immediately condemning whatever. So it's like it could be she's just misinformed. She's ignorant and was a little bit going into like conjecture of like maybe twist of facts or whatever. So we have to be mindful of that. Don't necessarily give her the benefit of the doubt, but we have to be mindful just in terms of accuracy of what possibilities may be. What she said in itself was not accurate. It's just an inaccurate. But what she is conveying, that's what the concern is, because and that's what the significant impact of that statement is, because it's an inaccurate statement to talk about the majority or the most black people have received reparations, and that's why black people in the United States don't talk about it as much. That's just an inaccurate statement. That's just to say that it's a false statement is strong, and is we can do that, but rather than that might be a little bit inflaming the situation. Would you say it's inaccurate? Now, the fact that she had just said something very knowledgeable and then like on just seconds later said that indicates that it's not just inaccurate, and that she's not just speaking she's not speaking beyond her frame of knowledge. There's an air and a strong suspicion of her intentionally speaking something that she knows is false, that she knows is inaccurate, and that's where we get into the falsity, and the deception, and the policy skewing, and like the messaging, because the consideration about that is like deflating and like taking the not the air but like the foundation of legitimacy about the ongoing affliction of black folk in this land today, of saying, oh, they've already been paid, they've already got their reparations. That's wrong, that's false, and that's also dangerous, um, particularly when articulated right after saying something that that actually has legitimacy. And people might say, yo, that her first statement about the Holocaust and reparations being illegitimate, particularly for those who say there was never a Holocaust. People might say there was never any reparations. I mean, we get into the whole scenario. But it's generally, I presume it's generally recognized, even if people disagree about there being a Holocaust, that there was some type of reparations afterwards. I don't know how much people disagree about that, but that was a further factual state as much as we understand. So for her to make that statement in a very knowledgeable and forthright way, and then in the same way talk about black people already in the United States already receiving reparations, and that's why black people in the United States don't talk about it as much. that smacks of intentionality, and that smacks of a further agenda that she's being used for to articulate that. So it's her face and her voice articulating that. That's what that smacks of. And that's why we had to turn it off at that point. Like, no holler at that point. Peace and blessings to her, and we're going to reason and talk about it further. But when we see that, it's like we can't even listen any further. And in the whole comment, like, we're get back at the comment section. It's like, at this point, like, I got 1 day a week to do things, and less anticipation to do that. I'm already taking up time right now. So, anyways, that's a side note, because we had to give some voice to that amidst all the back and forth between mixed and black right now. So that just fuel to the flame. So we had to do some mitigation in this respect. I should have said a blessing to get out of the zone that I'm in before I do this. So if I'm going to be stopped whilst I'm working, I got to stop working. All right. That was the second joint, which was getting over. So the third joint is superiority. And so superiority, here's the thing about this. Like, to recognize the delusion and the fallacy of superiority. I've already talked about that, but like, here's part of, like, recognizing the whole perception, the psyche, the psychology, the logic and the psychology, the logic and the psychologic concerning the perception of supremacy, superiority, whatever we want to call that. To recognize that in whatever way somebody perceives oneself as superior, to recognize that it is beyond their doing. It's beyond whatever they've done. That notion of superiority is generally based upon something somebody intrinsically is, naturally is, inherently, inheritedly is, and therefore is that superiority, beyond their control, beyond their doing, beyond what others can control, and beyond what others can do. Either others are or are not in that category of superiority, that characteristic of superiority. So that can be very intoxicating, very reassuring to a very fragile ego. Not ego, ego. Ego's got enough things to worry about. It's assuring, it's intoxicating, it's seemingly self-affirming. Like, no matter what you do, you still have the superiority. So we can call it privilege or otherwise. Privilege is a delusion. Similarly, it's very similar to this. Because what it is this. When somebody buys into that notion of being superior, of having some type of supremacy beyond what they do, at that point, the way they keep it is by abiding by whatever the precepts are surrounding that supremacy. That was a lot of words. So let's try to unpack that and articulate it in a further simple way. If somebody is perceiving themselves as superior in some way, supreme in some way, beyond their own doing and beyond their own control, they know that. That person knows that. And so even though the person is experiencing some favored treatment and recognition and status and otherwise, there is in that having some kind of strengthened ego and sense of self because of that. At the same time, there's a fear in that person because the person knows I didn't do anything to deserve this. And therefore, I don't know how it works. I don't know how it might be taken away. And so basically like the basic way of describing is that the person who perceives themselves as supreme, as superior, becomes essentially enslaved to the people who consider that person superior and supreme, and intrinsically endeavors to appease those people who proclaim that person to be superior and supreme in order to be continued to be called superior and supreme. But it's a pimp game. And it exists particularly because the person is aware in their heart that they haven't done anything. They haven't done something substantial to warrant that type of favoritism. And so because of that, are increasingly acquiescent to the people who are very emphatic. Oh no, you are superior, da 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 da. And it becomes again like being like fronted weight on the streets, given you got this thing, you can do things with that. But simultaneously, still gotta like play the game and cater to the people who are making that proclamation. So just that's for people's information. That's an FYI about superiority and supremacy. Another way of describing it is in another kind of context with a certain affirmational rhetoric, which is this: when we work diligently for like in anything, and we receive a wages for it, even if we just work in the field and like we plant plants and we tend to the plants and then the plants grow and produce fruit, we have a sense of like relationship. We know how it happens. We did it. We were in it. We work it. The labor, and there's fruits for the labor that are shown. Now, ultimately, we still don't know because it's all miraculous. It's amazing life. But we actually are involved in the process. So when we partake of that fruit, there's a sense of peace and confidence, and we don't. It's beyond pride. It's a sense of fulfillment and affirmation. When we share the fruit with others, when we share the fruit with our children, that's blessings upon blessings, and we are solid in that experience because we know we do the work for that to happen. When we get involved in these abstractions, where we're relying increasingly on other people, particularly when technology is doing a lot of the work, and we don't know how things work, we might have some education, we might have a salary, we might provide a service, we might get a high salary for that service, but at the same time, it's all abstraction, it's all evaluations, it's all imagination. And at some point we consider like what are we doing to receive this, particularly if we're just going to the store otherwise. So anyways, that's getting a little bit off topic, but superiority, it's a pimp game, and recognizing that those anybody who perceives themselves as superior is enslaved to the people who share that proclamation. Oftentimes it's a matter of being part of a collective, but even when it's the collective just identifying one person as superior, even Jesus, that person becomes enslaved to the people who are making that proclamation. So the person has a decision to make about how much one accepts that and how much one is willing to buck those accusations and say thank you but no thank you. I'll share the supremacy. So it's difficult to do sometimes when kinfolk is very lucrative, just to say okay. That's supremacy. The fourth one, before the joint, women. What we are becoming increasingly aware of is the women trafficking scene. I'm not trying to be too specific, not trying to call out or put any particular kinfolk, any particular community on blast. We're at Cuatro now. But this is what we observe about the trafficking game. And this is particularly about women. Young women from teenage years to young adult 30s, thereabouts. But what we observe, we're putting some puzzle parts together with this one. So this is a work in progress. But basically, it's like recognizing how women are trafficked on the low, with a lot of pretenses and whatever else, in very conservative Orthodox communities, according to Orthodox law, about the availability, the opportunity of having a servant, even within one's own religiosity, for different reasons, for indebtedness or otherwise. And there's different protocols within Judaism, there's protocols within Islam, but even within one's own group, being able to have a servant who works for somebody else, who's essentially either indentured servant for a specific period, whether it's 7 years or otherwise. But that's a thing. It's an ancient thing. We don't think about that today, but there's a consideration that it exists at this very moment. People are living, abiding by this low-key, off the books, and it might be looked at as an employee or otherwise in conventional terms, but in actuality and in mutual consent, the person's like, it might be a woman who's like been abandoned by her family. She might have lived up a life, and now she's like run out and like needs backup, and so she attaches herself with somebody who can provide her with some stability, and agrees to abide by the servitude for a certain period, and there it is. And work at a store, work as a tutor or otherwise. What we observe oftentimes, well, and this is in a very, very conservative circle of people, a very conservative community, again, in a number of different religions and a number of different ethnicities, but somebody, particularly young women, being indentured servants, which is not the same thing as a full-out slave, but it's towards that, and even involving sex, being traded with other people in the community, and her being known for that, and it's still being accepted within the community, and it's all quiet, closed doors to everybody else. It's nobody else's business. We handle all of this in-house, but it's known she's a servant. She's less available for marriage per se, unless there's a man that has similar qualifications. And meanwhile, like when a young boy is being introduced into manhood and is being provided with a sexual partner, she might be hired to the parents for a period, and it's her volition. Like she agrees to it because she knows it's part of the tradition. She knows she's going to be treated with certain safety, provided with certain safety and support. She's not going to be completely abandoned onto the streets, so she participates in a comparatively willful way. And it's a quiet, like she's accepted in terms of certain elements of the community, in terms of socializing and otherwise, maybe invited, participating in shul, or I said shul, but at the masjid or the shul or the church or the temple or otherwise, but it's known in the community quietly. If you're looking from the outside, you're not going to see it, but she's a servant. And I'm saying she, but it's also he too, but it has different implications. So anyways, we observe this particularly in a comparatively secular sense. When we see young sistren working at different establishments, we see very strong signs of trafficking, of like the sistren having the surface level job of just being a server or a barista or whatever else. But the further lucrative component of the employment and the arrangement is much further salacious, where and there's a certain, again, volitional part on her part, a consensual part of like a man seeing her, meeting her, and saying, yo, I want to have sex with her, and then talking to whoever is need to be talked to, the manager, the proprietor, whatever, and be like, yo, how much for a date? And it's not that crass, often like explicit kind of thing. But then the arrangements are made in a very low-key way, another day or whatever, meeting autonomously, not even exchanging contact information, whatever else, and then completing the deal, and there it is. And she gets paid considerably well with that, and tends to be very higher price in these type of situations from what we observe and surmise and deduce. But again, it's servitude because she is being utilized in an exploitational way, but at the same time is agreeing to it because it could be a lot worse. It could be a lot further violent and abusive to her. So there's a certain amount of favorability in that scenario. And we're seeing, I mean, it's just, again, it's very difficult to just call out and say that that's what's happening. Um, but there's a lot of strong evidence that shows that this is happening, it's a thing, and not only that, but how pervasive it actually is. So that in its pervasiveness, there's much further challenge of it being called out, because calling it out on one involves calling it out on all, and all here is a huge number from what we observe, from the signs that we observe. Actual testimony here and there that is explicit, but even then, again, like we're talking about the consequences in terms of being revealed or outed or otherwise, rather severe, and it's serious, disappearances and otherwise. So for people to even acknowledge this and speak on it, um, there are consequences. There are consequences for not speaking on it too. Those seem to be less obvious for people, but those are actually further severe. There are consequences all around. So, the nature of seedless grapes. Um, that's what we observe. Case in point, well, I'm not gonna go there, but we're observing the trafficking. We are observing the trafficking of women between syndicates, between ethnic groups, and additionally brokering, deals being made. Pimps talk about how much a woman can be used up, how much a pimp can use a woman before she's gone, um, and so trades being made accordingly. What can be done to help a woman return after she's gone? What does gone mean? Like her mind is just, again, we're talking about a mind meld when people have sex. And so when a woman has sex with many men, she's also having sex with all the women that those men have had sex with as well. And when people delve into that type of culture and behavior, the numbers tend to be larger and the mindsets tend to be further shut down in terms of being able to concentrate and additionally. And so when a woman is like absorbing all those things, if you think about a room, and if it's a quiet room and there's one person in the quiet room reading or doing whatever else, oftentimes that person is able to concentrate comparatively well. If there are two people in a room, then there might be heightened concentration, or if one person is trying to read, another person is like talking on the phone or doing something noise, that dilutes the concentration in the room. And the further people you add to the room, all the different activity that people are doing, it can be difficult to sit in the middle of that room and just focus on either reading or just being quiet and just calm or whatever else. It's just anybody who enters the room and anything that they got going on is added to the mix. And anything that anybody's trying to do distinctively and additionally becomes further tenuous. So that's what sex is like. When somebody has sex with another person, now they're living with that other person. They're Siamese twins psychologically. Anything that other person is going through, they're going through too. And so when people have a committed relationship with each other, it's actually amazing. It's multifold and it's miraculous, that meld, bringing new life into this world and guiding that new life in a healthy way. When the people are not committed to each other and like starting to have intimacies and bringing other people into that room, like it don't have an order. Like when people are, even when there's multiple people in the room, let's say a man has 4 wives, but they all live in the same way. They all know how to treat each other and respect each other and accommodate each other. They know that I'm going to go to my corner. Here's our time to have a meal together. Okay, cool. In this room. Here's our time to be quiet and just kind of be to ourselves in this room together. Okay. Here's our time to like dance and listen to music and everything together. Okay, cool. Here's our time to do our own thing. Everybody's on the same accord. When people don't have that type of pre-established culture of how to get along with each other, and it's just kind of like, just we meet each other. Oh, you look nice. Oh, you look nice. I'm vibing. Let's go. Don't have this know-how of how to live with each other day in and day out. And so when being in the room together, it's like, I listen to music. Well, I just keep it quiet. Oh, I bang on the door. Oh, I yell. I can do what I want. I can do what I want. That makes just further static and kicking up dust in that room. And that's a lot of what happens when people are on different types of stuff. So that's what happens when a woman gets gone, when a pimp is using her up, because he's not being very judicious about who she has sex with. He's just getting money. So whatever that man's lifestyle is, however he lives, she's fusing with that when she has sex with, and he's fusing with her. People don't get to talk about too much the John getting gone because maybe it looks like this. But that's what it means with the sister. It's like her head gets gone because of the concentration. She's just out there. And it gets to the point of just it being too difficult to communicate because she's not trying to hear it. It's not even that she's not trying to hear it. She's not hearing it. So it's nasty. Now that being said, it's not all gone. What it actually means is that she's gone for the purposes of the pimp. Like he has no use for her at that point. He's used her up. Discarding at the very least. Now, we also know that there's always redemption. There's always the prospect of teshuva, of returning, and healing. It's not a matter of returning innocence and virginity and anything else, but there is a calmness, there is a healing, there is a life. But that involves work, and that involves support in additionally. So we observe increasingly this game of women trafficking between the syndicates, the prospect of marriage with the women servants, and how that's orchestrated amongst the syndicates. When a woman is being married, after she's had relations with a number of men already, there's a necessity of those men in some way being reconciled with each other, of agreeing to terms about how to interact with each other, particularly when a man is arriving as a husband with her. When the men are sharing the same culture, and additionally it's easier to find that reconciliation of just like, okay, we're going to be in this part, we're going to be in this part, we're not going to see each other. Let's keep it at that. And then accordingly, eventually there's the necessity of direct reconciliation, but that's another story. In the meanwhile, there's at least an intermediate kind of arrangement that enables her to be married, things to be solidified, mutually respectful, basic boundaries of interaction and habitation and otherwise. And then life continues on, sharing a very modest amount of it with children and otherwise. When men are living different protocols, don't come to terms, reconcile with it, that's when things are further contentious. Warfare, Helen of Troy, and otherwise. So that's how things are today. And the syndicates are much further intricate, multi-continental, multilinguistic, multicultural. Women have sex with a number of men from a number of different cultures. Mixed women, what up? So the implications of settling down, marriage, stability, and otherwise are on at a next level at this point, and it requires a discipline. But we are becoming increasingly, I personally am becoming increasingly aware of the trafficking specifically and intricately, in further detail of how it works. My all wise ways and everything, and just learning about women trafficking. And not only that, but also the immediacy, like the availability of arrangements of syndicates being like, yo, we got this woman, we know you're looking for a wife, we can make an arrangement. That sounds very crass. This is actual life. It in many ways it is business. It's tribal, it's political, it's diplomacy, it's economics, and all that. So that's what we're speaking of in this respect. Part of the challenge, particularly with myself and being attached to a woman, particularly who's already involved with other men in terms of her past behavior, the challenge is that the discipline that we live is very strict, and it's difficult for other brethren, let alone the sister. And sistren have adaptability and flexibilities. That's one thing. But it's not just a matter of her. It's a matter of all the men that she's eternally attached with, particularly in this life. We're all eternally attached to each other, ultimately. But in this life, Everyone she's ever had sex with before, that's bringing into the table in the relationship that she has with a husband, in myself particularly, presume, presuming that type of situation, that particular scenario. And in that scenario, our lifestyle, beyond my volition, I don't have the ability to negotiate this lifestyle. It is what it is, and it's strict. Um, we don't say it's perfect or superior, but it's strict, and it's difficult for many vegan. Oh, I ain't no be no vegan. So then, without that kind of compliance of everybody in the room being in a compatible way, um, then there's the contention. A lot of that contention to date has precluded the marriage itself from being manifested. Um, and anyway, the marriage, in the scenario of the marriage being manifested, and with the prospect of being married with a virgin, myself marrying a virgin, then there's less of the concerns about the contention. Although technically, to be honest, this is facts, there's a very plausible scenario of being married with a virgin who is already active on the internet in terms of displaying herself or otherwise, and that's nasty. But that's we have to factor that into it, and so there's attachment to the men or the boys that she has that type of interaction with as well. So that factors into it too. It has less, because there's less of the direct flesh kind of interaction. There's less of that severity in terms of negotiation or whatever, but it still is a significant factor. Um, but generally speaking, in marrying a virgin, it alleviates a lot of those concerns about reconciling with other men that she would have otherwise had relationships with. So it makes it comparatively simpler that way. But however, in the scenario of a virgin, she's very strong. She's very powerful. She's got strong powers. And her parents have strong scrutiny about her relationship. So there's a very strong and legitimate, I won't say challenge, but a lot of work in that scenario. And even for her parents to have a proficient understanding or recognition or perspective about what we are on this side. So that's that. And otherwise, without her being a virgin, then again we get into that scenario of reconciling with her past relationships. Even with her having any kind of like lesbian interactions with other women, that factors into it as well. It's still the mind meld, and all the any men that her any woman partner that she's had, factoring into it as well. So that's cross. That's details. That might be TMI. It's life. So that being said, marriage continues to be a beautiful thing, the perfect balance. We have examples, teachers from before us on how to be reconciled with each other, who show that it's not always this dream scenario of everything perfect and dreamland this and dreamland that, but that there's very actual challenges to overcome, to be reconciled with, to come to terms with, and to make the best in life from. And the emphasis is living day in and day out in a healthy way, a balanced way, maybe putting on some clothes, having some decent food, and teaching children, our children, God willing, how to walk these roads of creation. His Majesty Haile Selassie and Her Majesty Waisaroman provide beneficial example. Moshe Rabbeinu and Zipporah, Avraham Avinu and Sarah, Avraham Avinu and Hagar. Keturah is the other name for Hagar, I think, something to that effect. It's Shabbat, but the parsha this week is Messiah and Matot. The Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and his wives, each of his wives, and all the differentiation and similitude. The Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama and his wife and child. Jesus, Mary Magdalene, Wada. The great peacemaker, Diganawida. And the woman who provides guidance and support in his path before meeting Hiawatha. Kung Tzu and his wife and son, his nephews, and the arrangement of marriage that he facilitates for his nephews. Actually, his nieces and his nephews eventually. Rama and Sita, Sri Krishna, Arjuna. Sri Krishna and his own consorts, Arjuna and his own wives, the names of which escape me at the moment, to the best of my recollection. That's somewhat outside the Bhagavad Gita, and that's the Mahabharata, and so my frame of reference is significantly within the Bhagavad Gita, extremely obviously, modestly within the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata is much larger. Oh, yeah. That's not an excuse, but it is facts. Anyways, so, well, there's the work we were supposed to do today. On this day that we're not supposed to be doing work. This is a very expensive discourse right here, just for your information. It's beyond the standard rate of 5,000. But we can say Audi 3,000. Anyway, that's it. We give all thanks and praise to the Most High, Elohim. A blessed love and peace in Rastafari.